Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Edward Jang. I'm a doctoral student studying educational psychology at Auburn University. Today, we have a special guest, Dr. Anyichie. Dr. Anyichie is an assistant professor at Brandon University, and he's also an incoming senior program chair for our SIG. And he's here to talk about his research experience and helpful advice for graduate students. Before I begin my interview, I'd like to give Dr. Anyichie a round of applause. So our first interview question is, could you tell us about yourself?
Sure. And before I begin with talking about myself, thank you so much for having me to this interview session. I'm Aloysius Anyichie. I'm a Nigerian Canadian with diverse educational background. I have two bachelor degrees, one in philosophy and the other in theology, and two master's degrees, one in religion and society and the other in educational psychology. I also have a diploma in mass communication. I moved to Canada for my PhD program, which I completed in 2018 at the University of British Columbia, Vancouver, under the supervision of Professor Deborah Butler. And then after graduating, I taught at the same university and Bishop's University. Currently, I am an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Psychology and Student Services at Brandon University. I teach classes in educational psychology, like development processes, in terms of learning processes, classroom assessment and evaluation. And my research agenda focuses on the intersection of culture, motivation, engagement, and self-regulation of learning. And so this is a little bit background about me.
So our second question is, how has your past student experience shaped you as a researcher?
I think that is a very interesting question. In the bigger picture, each of the programs I've completed is a bit instrumental to developing who I am as a researcher. I learned from my philosophy program to apply critical thinking in my research. And through my degrees in religion and society and theology, I was exposed to issues of social justice and equity. And in my PhD program, I learned a lot about theories of human development, learning, development, and culture, and research in this area. And so with this, the background I have is shaping me and the way I think about cross-cultural understandings about research on self-regulation of learning and cultural diversity. And also my program in mass communication is helpful in the ways I try to disseminate my research finding. Apart from the classroom program in terms of degrees, I see my lived experiences, especially during my PhD program, playing a role that is very crucial. That was the time I had a firsthand experience of studying a different culture and then being in a culturally diverse classroom. And it was actually at that time that I was developing my research around self-regulation of learning. So through my readings, I realized that research and self-regulation of learning tend to pay too much attention on learning as individual processes with less attention on the impact of student culture on their regulatory processes. And also in classes, sometimes I see some topics or concepts that do not resonate with me in terms of my lived experiences. And so at those moments, I kind of struggled with my motivation and engagement. However, I try to deal with some of these challenges by having a deeper thinking about those concepts, those ideas, and how they can make meaning to me, trying to make connection between then my cultural background and lived experiences. And so occasionally I will try to take up activities or even assignments in the class to write on some of these things in relation to my background, so how relevant they are to me. And so these were some of the ways I tried to navigate these challenges. And so based on this experience, I thought that it might be good to understand more about the impact of culture and how educators could be helped to support students from different cultures, especially when they're studying together in the same classroom context. And so these are some of the ways my past student experience is shaping my research processes, agenda, and who I am when it comes to conducting educational research.
Question 3. In your research overview, it seems like you have investigated the relationship between self-regulation and culturally responsive pedagogy. What motivates you to conduct this research? Are you working in your research now?
Yes, I really examine the relationship between self-regulated learning and cultural responsive teaching. And what motivated me into this research is the experience I already shared, especially trying to find out how to support classroom teachers, educators, in the best way to support culturally diverse students. And so during my reading and trying to understand the best way about this, I came in contact with cultural responsive pedagogy, which highlights the important role student cultural background, their social context is playing in the way they learn, and with invitation to consider students' lived experiences, even their cultural frame of mind in designing classroom context. And so this area of research has some practices on how we can do this. And because of this knowledge of mine at that moment, I conducted a theoretical analysis using sociocultural and situative perspective to learning as a lens, to look at the principles and practices of self-regulated learning and cultural responsive pedagogy. And then I found out that actually they complement each other. They could be integrated together to support culturally diverse students. And so that led to the development of culturally responsive self-regulated learning framework, which is developed to help teachers with some practices they can implement in their classroom context in order to understand students' learning. And so I collaborate with teachers in designing practices that combine attention to cultural responsive pedagogy, as well as self-regulated learning, and examine how students are participating in those contexts, as well as how those enacted practices might be shaping students' learning processes. And currently, I'm actually working on a funded research that is helping me understand pre-service teachers' learning processes and their self-efficacy. So I'm trying to see how the implementation of this framework among pre-service teachers is shaping their learning processes, and their exposure to this framework might be helping them in terms of self-efficacy when it comes to teaching in culturally diverse classroom. And interestingly, I will be presenting the preliminary finding at the International Conference on Motivation in Germany this August. So it is an exciting thing for me. And yeah, that is how I've been working on this research till the moment.
Well, thank you, Dr. Anyichie, for your response. But I actually have a follow-up question. And my question is, what kinds of values do you believe this research will bring out?
Thanks for this question. And I think that the values of this research is evident in the contributions it's making in terms of theory, research, and practice. In the area of theory is actually drawing attention to the impact of culture on students' self-regulation of learning. In other words, to understand more how students' culture is shaping the way they might be regulating their learning in different contexts. And then it's contributing to research in the terms of inviting us to situate our self-regulated learning research in the context of students' social and cultural background. So for example, to examine how the integration of these two areas of research I've talked about might be shaping students' learning. And then it's also contributing in terms of the need to connect with educators, in other words, to develop researcher-practitioner partnership in understanding of different ways we can support culturally diverse students. And in my research, I use mixed method embedded into case study design because it helps me to collect multiple sources of data, which will be very helpful in understanding student learning processes situated in context. When it comes to practice, this research is actually presenting educators with knowledge and tools about the practices they can use in their classrooms, and then at the same time showing how the exposure to teachers with this framework can actually improve their self-efficacy in order to prepare them better to teach in culturally diverse classroom context. And so these are some of the values I think this research is already bringing, especially when it comes to our SIG in terms of culture and self-regulation of learning.
Thank you for your wonderful response, and I will move on to the next question. Question 4. What are some recommendations that you want to share with graduate students?
Thanks again for this question, which I think is very important. I will summarize my recommendations for students under 3 major ideas, which is PAN. So passion, expansion, and networking. So passion, I mean graduate students getting into research they're passionate about, something that is of interest to them. So as a graduate student, to find something that is relevant to you and work on it. Think about something you can wake up at the middle of the night and work on without being too tired about it, where you can make a difference. That is passion. The second one is expansion. Graduate school is a time you need to expand on your knowledge, your horizon in terms of research, even within your area of field study, and even to go beyond that. Because after your graduate study, you might not have as much time to read as you have as a graduate student. And so it is a time to expand the frontiers of your knowledge, especially your interest of research, as well as knowing what other people are doing in the same field. The third one is networking. You know, graduate school sometimes can be isolatory in some ways. There are times it could be too challenging that you feel lonely, disconnected from the people. At that moment, your social network can be your life wire. And so it's very important to network. Go to social events in your institutions. Come to conferences like our SIG. You meet people with the like mind and research interest so that when it becomes too challenging for you in your program, you'll be able to see some people who would support you in the process. And so these are my recommendations: PAN, passion, expansion, and networking.
Thank you. I will also remind myself about the acronym PEN, passion, expansion, and networking. So that's really helpful advice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So for our last interview question, I'd like to ask, as the incoming senior program chair of our SIG, do you have any last comment?
My comment will be that of appreciating what the previous people in the same role have contributed to our SIG, and in a special way to build on what they've already started their good work, especially my predecessor, immediate one, Dr. Ed Flagningen, and to build on what he has already done to make sure that our subsequent conferences, we will always have diverse presentations that will be enriching and have a good program where we can support one another, grow together, and learn as a community. So it's all about continuing from what others have done and to improve on that, to make sure that our community is that which is very welcoming, supportive, and we go ahead together as one family. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anyichie, for your response. And I believe that the audience will find this interview very helpful and effective. And thank you so much for your time again, sharing your great experiences. And we look forward to your great work in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.